Good morning. How's everybody?
Woo!
High energy, I love it. I'm Jason Mitsky. I am an AI specialist leader in the West for Red Hat. I want to introduce you to our panelists today. Mark Shank is from KPMG. I'll let him do his own intro. And then we have Eric also from Cox Communication is coming up to the stage. So what you're gonna hear from us today is we've got one part doer in Eric, we've got one part advisor in Mark, and we've got the plumbing software company represented through Red Hat. So we have a few heady questions or tectonic shifts that we're noticing in the field that we wanted to run by you as a discussion or a panel in this case. So please, if there's anybody in the room who can resonate with us, see us afterward. We'd love to talk to you and have a private chat. But let's get going with intros. So Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Awesome. Great to see everybody. My name is Mark Shank. I'm the Google Cloud Platform Leader for KPMG, which is across all sectors, and I also lead AI for the banking sector within KPMG. So my personal background is mostly in services to various banks.
And hello, my name is Eric Pace. I am the head of AI at Cox Communications, and in that role, I have responsibility for everything that the company does for AI, from strategy through implementation, governance, infrastructure, security, and the like. And I do want to call out that with the infinite power of the universe in your pocket, you are still wearing a calculator watch.
This is a 1981 calculator watch. I'm very proud of it.
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. All right, so let's get started with some news that has come out and evolved over the last couple of weeks. The Hugging Face incident, or the Hugging Face breach that's been in the news. So the facts are that on July 9th, a OpenAI model with its guardrails completely dismantled reached outside of its sandbox proxy environment, connected to the internet, and then decided it was going to get the answers to the test from Hugging Face. So it breached the production environment of Hugging Face. It spent 5 days examining the Hugging Face production environment before it was discovered. One of the fun facts in this is that when Hugging Face then did their log analysis, the security guardrails for the OpenAI model or Anthropic model, the frontier model they were using to examine those logs, spit up their guardrails and wouldn't allow them to examine the logs. So they had to self-host GLM 5.2 to run their log analysis to understand how comprehensive this breach was and what happened essentially. What did the OpenAI model get access to? And then so it took another few days for OpenAI to admit that they were responsible for this model breaching Hugging Face. And then just recently, because of this, Anthropic went back and they looked at some of their logs and they found that they too had a model that had breached 3 other independent companies. So in every one of these kind of waves of AI that gets scarier and scarier and starts to look like science fiction meeting reality, there's usually somebody who raises their hand and says, all right, this is it, this is when the government is actually going to act. So in the aftermath of this Hugging Face breach, there were actually 2 different legislative responses, so which is good. There's now 2 bills that have been released to support the framework for governing AI at a federal level. And then there was also a White House framework that was supposed to be due yesterday. They said that they have a framework, but they haven't released the details of that framework, so we're still waiting on what that looks like as well. Question to you, Mark, is now that we've had this Hugging Face breach, is this really the time where Washington starts to intervene?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that, I guess something worth kind of pointing out that maybe is underappreciated about these breaches is that the models still kind of behaved in a relatively aligned way, in the sense that they didn't go in and like wreck it or hold it hostage or try to get them to pay a ransom or something. Like it was trying to achieve its goal, and worked really hard to try and achieve its goal. It's kind of the ultimate example of the paperclip, meme. Like, but they didn't try to destroy something. They were trying to get the answers to the test or trying to accomplish whatever it was set out to do. And I guess there's some small solace in that. In regards to the your direct question, is this? It feels like it's being treated a little bit like no harm, no foul. But the federal government has already shown that they have the ability to pull a lever and shut down a model if they need to. I do think that the action is inevitable. It's just a timing question. Is it in the next quarter, or are they going to wait for something else that gets a little more public attention and that kind of, I guess if you go back to like the SolarWinds incident when a lot of those cyber regulations started coming out and things like that, do we need something at that level that is really going to precipitate? But I think at least if I had to hang my hat on something, I would give it less than 50% chance either of those bills are adopted as is.
I mean, doesn't it just accelerate the need to have some form of open access to the models that can help prevent some of these things? I mean, I quite frankly, I don't know that anybody in this room should be surprised that it happened with all of the tales of what Mythos is capable of and what all is going on out there. I don't know that we're necessarily surprised that it happened. I don't know that we are surprised that it took them a week to come clean, but the question is should they have known as the model was running? And we were having a conversation earlier. Like we've got a very mature cybersecurity posture. We manage critical infrastructure for the country. We have cyber teams that are agentically enabled that are doing wild and crazy things they never imagined. And yet we execute workflows all the time, both internally and externally. And we don't monitor the NatSAS level detail of every single agentic call. And so like we pale in comparison relative to what OpenAI is doing in the lab. And so I'm not surprised that they didn't see it. I think it's great that they came clean, and the fact that the most transparent company that's sitting out there within Anthropic also figured out that this was happening and they didn't know about it either is something that should just serve as a reminder to all of us that we need to go take our security posture seriously. These things are now going to happen. And maybe it's provocative, but quite frankly, I think we should be thankful that it was OpenAI and Hugging Face instead of some nation state model that was going to do something more nefarious than try to get the answers to a test.
It's a really good point where you're operating and what has been national, systemic infrastructure for a long time. These companies are just a couple of years old. Or obviously OpenAI is older, but in its incarnation of its size and significance, they're very new, and they don't yet have these processes in place to be national infrastructure and have that kind of security. And it's just indicative of how badly they need to mature very quickly.
So one other thought occurs to me is when you have these agents that are acting beyond their intended purpose, who's responsible? So when this breach happens, who owns it? Is it the model provider, the platform, the deploying enterprise? Who owns responsibility, and who is going to get technically held responsible?
Sorry, that one's that's a big one. I think that will get sorted out in court. It's gonna depend a lot on the specific contract that you have signed with your model provider, and that infrastructure provider has signed with the model company that they got the model. Because in most situations, you're using infrastructure that's not yours, and on that infrastructure, they're using a model that is not theirs, and there is a daisy chain of civil liability that will get. I do think there'll probably be some standards that get set, but that'll be likely through litigation.
But what level of accountability are we looking for, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's accountable. Everybody's accountable for the seat that they sit in and the things that happen in and around them. Meaning, if the levels of accountability live at the legal level, then yes, I'm sure there's some accountabilities that sit within OpenAI for managing a platform that had unknown capabilities in this wild universe of things that are happening. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that somebody sitting over at Hugging Face that has responsibility for security infrastructure or operations can say, oh, yes, they broke into our real estate, but guess what? OpenAI is accountable for that. That's fine. right? Someone at Hugging Face has to answer the question as well about why they were exposed in the manner that they were.
Good point. Let me pivot a little bit to a different topic about unit economics. So KPMG's Q2 AI Pulse said that there's 202 million on average AI investment coming in the next 12 months. So about a quarter of that, though, is with organizations that have real-time visibility into what it costs them to run their AI. So as we move into agentic workflows, the adoption and the tokenization is going to grow non-linearly. It's going to grow exponentially. Eric, what is your organization doing to help monitor AI spend and give yourself some way of staying ahead of it?
Yeah, I'll start by saying that I think that there's there's probably many ways to do this, right? We have found a way that certainly works for us, but that also comes with this notion that I think a lot of companies are worried about macro level spends, and the way they think they're going to control that is on a person by person or unit based, perspective. Like it's one thing to go look at what everybody in the room is doing from like a token consumption perspective, but I don't think that necessarily means, and we don't think that necessarily means that you have to go enforce at the user level all the things that are happening, right? Our assumption today, which is largely proving out, is that the value that is created at the macro level by total token consumption is accommodating for the individual journeys that are producing no value whatsoever. Right now, and this may change in the future, but right now that's a cost of education. It's a cost of literacy. If we want everybody in the company to go put their hands on an agent or to go build something or go consume tokens, the only way to do this right now is to go learn by doing, and so we let them go get their hands on it. We have a means in which we can assess the token consumption on an individual basis, right? We happen to be very heavily involved with Anthropic through Cloud Enterprise, and through their APIs, our infrastructure teams have built dashboards and built visibility into what every single person's, not only what their token consumption is on a daily, minutely, hourly basis, but what models you're using, and then we can tell what models they're using for what type of things. And typically what we do is we'll go look at high token consumers on a rolling 3-week, 4-week basis, and the folks that rise to the top we're going to have conversations with, right? We have 13,000, 14, 15,000 employees. Not all of them are consuming, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month within.
There's a real bell curve there.
There is a bell curve, right? And so we focus at the top of the bell curve, and we go understand the value creation that's happening at the top, and the stuff that's happening in the valleys is currently, chalked up to an education cost. But there are ways and means right now that everybody has access to see what people are doing. I just don't think that they understand how they should be doing those things, but they're there and they're available to you. And we employ capabilities through AI gateways, so we understand, again, how to control which models are being accessed, right? Because we have controls like most companies do, that people have to be working on our hardware, right? You have to use a company-owned laptop. If you're on our network, you're on our VPN, so we understand, what you're doing, where you're going, ingress, egress, et cetera. And we just proxy all of those calls through our gateway, so we understand, general model usage. We understand who's doing what through those API reporting features that we built, et cetera. And so it's, the visibility is not that hard to get. The question is, what do you want to do with the visibility once you have it? And we choose to let the valleys, be the valleys, and then we go focus on the top end consumers and just ensure that they have good stories to tell. And for the most part, if you have someone spending that much money, they're either building their own business on your dime or they're doing something incredibly valuable for your company.
I'm curious your thoughts on as information workers have become more productive, there has been some kind of increase in baseline costs. If you hired somebody in the 70s, the cost of adding a new employee to your floor was maybe a desk, a phone, some pens and paper. And then, you're adding a computer and you're adding software, and now you're paying the Microsoft Office fee, and now you're adding cloud and ERP, and now there's tokens that go on top of that. But we're also starting to get into agent automation, where you want to build some HR self-service agents, or you want to do invoice stuff in the back office with procurement. And at that point, you just need the model that actually gets the task done for the lowest amount. Yeah. Right. And there's real optimization to be gained there.
Yeah. And I think that the answer to that comment ultimately sits at the intersection of capacity and and literacy, right? Like we have only so much capacity with a team of experts that can go help a company navigate this journey, into the how and the why you want to use certain models or what you want to do with them. And it's a daunting task. Our team has chosen over the last 24 to 36 months to spend as much time as possible in meetings, either one-on-one, one-on-10, one-on-100, one-on-1000, we don't care. We have driven a literacy principle throughout the company that gets people to understand what it is they're doing and why. And then again, we have an accountability to look at some of the monitoring that we have in place, so we understand when people are, writing emails with Opus 5. Like, not a good use of time now, or Fable, right? But like at the end of the day, the cost impact of a few people writing their emails with Fable is insignificant. Do you want that to happen at scale? No, but you also have to go sit with them. And so we run sessions, and we've created communities, and we've created an environment in which the people that we're teaching are starting to teach other people. And now, we have roughly, I'll call it 2,000 non-engineers that have built a wild array of citizen-developed agents, because we've enabled them with a platform, we've given them guardrails to understand what you can and can't do, and we've given them the basics of, this is what you would use, Sonnet versus Haiku versus Opus versus, we haven't wildly enabled Fable yet because of the cost.
Sure.
But you give them enough to learn how to fish, and then they go fishing. And these 2,000 people in the last 8 to 10 months, they've got wild success rates in workflow execution. They've executed over 2 million workflows. We've seen productivity go through the roof. And we're not necessarily measuring the productivity gains as an organization for those people, but I can tell you based on unmanaged and non-backfilled attrition, the savings associated with the productivity gains we're seeing in just the citizen development workforce is monumental.
That's awesome.
One other challenge that might be facing a lot of people in this room is model velocity. So it used to be models were released on a monthly or annual cadence, and now that's accelerated from monthly to weekly to sometimes daily model releases. How, Eric, in your organization, are you dealing with this model velocity problem and constant changes of deprecated models from OpenAI?
Yeah, part of this I'll save you the rehash of the people architecture problem that I was just describing that's grounded in literacy. The other part of the problem that we've run into is that you have to start teaching engineers how to architect with AI solutions as well. And oftentimes what you run into is someone says, oh, we've built this system. It's this agentic harness, it's this agentic thing, it's this multi-agent system. And then you say, oh, well, what model were you using, or what models were you using? And they're like, oh, well, I used Sonnet 4.5 for the whole thing. You're like, but why? Because there's 50 agents that are doing things within this application that you've built, and not all of them need Sonnet. And it also creates a problem relative to what you were just describing, relative to model velocity and change, because at some point Anthropic's going to come in and say, hey, we're sunsetting 4.5, we're moving every bit of 5.5. And mostly the engineers and the business folks that are involved in these workflow executions or these platforms are looking at it like, oh, the model's getting better. The model may be getting better, but they don't understand that it's getting better in different ways, right? Even Sonnet 3.5 to 4.5, when we made that transition, if you look at the spider chart of capabilities within that model, it's good at different things. And ultimately that means that the responses and the answers and the algorithms that it's applying to the workflow that you're running are changing. In a very simple example, like we take some qualitative measures using some of our Anthropic models to measure things like sentiment in customer conversations that we're having with Gemini models. Well, when we moved up a model family version within Anthropic, the assessment criteria that the Anthropic models were using got a lot more stringent on how it was looking at the quality of those conversations. Nothing changed in the conversations, but our quality fell through the floor, and everyone started to ask why. Well, the model thinks differently. It looks at things differently with a different set of criteria, and so you have to think about what that means to re-baseline everything as you're managing model velocity and the complexity of your model landscape relative to what you have it do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the kind of a version of the bitter lesson, in the sense that if you make an overly deterministic harness, or if you make a harness that's too tightly coupled to that particular jagged intelligence of the model, then you're going to be rebuilding that harness at some point. It's going to go away. I've seen interesting statistics from the frontier labs where, they kind of very deliberately keep the pricing the same for the old versions of the models because they don't want to incent transfer, and the usage of the older version of the models tends to stay level because people built things to use it, and the new usage comes in on the new model as their kind of aggregate usage goes up. And it is an important, we're learning kind of in real time how to build these kind of regression suites or these meta harnesses that can have these interchangeable components so that not everything you're working on is technical debt. But like if you built an AI agent in 2024 and even for most of 2025, it's probably technical debt right now, but like that, that's okay. You got value out of it. Software is a lot cheaper to build than it used to be. We have to change our mentality around that kind of thing.
Yeah, we say, I tell teams that are building all the time, and they're shocked when I say this. I will be surprised if your agent hits its first birthday. It's unlikely that the technology is going to survive the maturity curve that it's operating through.
One way to give yourself more control, and I'm sure that, Mark, you've seen this in the banking industry, in the financial sector, is the notion of sovereign AI. So controlling the models that you host because you're hosting it on your on-prem bare metal environments. Mark, is that something that banks are adopting? You've seen adoption of sovereign AI where they are self-hosting models to provide that access control, but then also give them stronger governance controls too?
Asks the red hat guy. So yes, actually. So I've seen a lot of both. The on-prem market is really challenged with the cost issue right now. So building out on-prem infrastructure, if you're not a hyperscaler level purchaser, is uniquely challenging in the current market. But I've certainly had clients that have purchased racks of B200s and have those and use them for specific workloads that are in data centers that they manage. I think that usually when you hear the term sovereign, it's kind of talking about like geolocation and regulatory regime by location. I do think that at the end of the day, the level of trust you have with your AI provider is akin to the level of trust you have with whoever's hosting your cloud email, and there are other vendors out there with whom you have that level of trust. I often I like this kind of conversation this question because this gets brought up a lot, and it's like, you trust other vendors this much, you realize that they have all of your data. You need to be able to have that degree of trust, and that is a little challenging with new vendors that we were just talking about, how they have some immaturity in regards to being critical national infrastructure. And so but you do have to get that level of trust, and there is certainly places where people are going to be very whether it's trade secret related or just for their interpretation of a regulation, they've decided the easiest way to do this, safest way to do this, is to just keep it all in their own estate and they're completely under their own control. That certainly does happen.
Is inference and where it runs, is that becoming a board level conversation?
I haven't seen that at the board.
Not for us.
And you, sovereign AI gives you total control over which models to run and which models specifically to exclude. Cox Communication doesn't run the Chinese models. What was the decision-making criteria there?
Yeah, I think we've, going back to the fact that I think we've got some, I'm gonna figure out how to say, fuck it. We've got some bad taste in our mouth, relative to history, being a critical infrastructure provider, right? If you remember, back 15, 20 years ago, a lot of the government insecurity relative to what Huawei was doing and what their hardware looked like in our infrastructure, et cetera, we made some decisions a long time ago to eliminate most, Chinese-born hardware, software from our network, right, period. And I think that's just carried through. And over the course of the first couple of months, when we were starting to look at what we wanted to tolerate relative to either taking on some of the cost, looking at open weight, or going down this path of allowing people to use what are effectively very, very good, if not leading models in the space from China, we just had to make a decision. And between me, our CISO, and some of our other leadership in a conversation, we just decided that it was easier to eliminate use of Chinese-born models within our real estate. Now, we've created some DMZ-like features within our Amazon footprint, and we've got some other relationships with some providers that allow us to basically build like DNS viable teardown infrastructure that allows some of our more capable or leading edge or bleeding edge folks to go test with some of those models, because we are interested in understanding what they are capable of and what they're better at and what they're doing. And we also get asked a lot of questions externally, opinion statements, where we're going. And so we don't allow it by default. I would be surprised if that lasts many more years, right? Because if you look at even what I think I read this morning, what was it? One of the leading Chinese model providers is now basically offering either Opus 5 or Fable level quality outputs for pennies on the input-output token. I mean, that's a 98% reduction in cost relative to the quality of output that you're talking about. I mean, at some point, that's going to be hard to ignore.
Yeah, that was DeepSeek V4 Flash. They just did their general availability release yesterday, and it's about 1/100th the cost of Fable. And that was for completed tasks. I mean, there is some improvement in the American open source market. Poolside had a really great release last month, and the Nemotron model series has really picked up, but it's a dwarf star by comparison, and we need a lot of improvement if we want to try and maintain a policy like that.
It's interesting, and I wonder, I oftentimes wonder, like the folks in this room, and you don't have to answer the question. It's just, there's always an emotional tie relative to what models you use or where your engineers are more interested in spending their time. We try to push for model diversity, but we end up finding that there's not a lot, right? We find that people go down an Anthropic path and then they never want to leave it. And so, you wonder how much model diversity do you want to inject into your ecosystem, and what that means for you to manage, from an operations perspective or other, the environments, the contracts, et cetera. Having some tooling in place certainly helps. But I think about like the Nemotron setup, et cetera. You ultimately get on a path where we don't have people that are highly equipped to go manage NVIDIA-based environments, right? And so, do we spend a lot of time with the Nemotron models? No. Do I wish we did? Yes, of course. But it's hard enough to find talent in this space. So you end up limiting yourself, but it also lends itself to this, this advice that we try to hold dear and keep ourselves to, that we give everybody else as well, which is, if you spend time fully enamored with the pace of innovation that's happening, and you worry about keeping up with everything that comes out every day, then you're never going to accomplish anything. So just go focus on something, go get it done, make it work, and then move on to the next thing, or scale that to the extent that you have people that can do it. I have to remind myself of that every day.
Or have a cloud partner that makes these open source models readily available and usable. But I totally hear you on the kind of model choice, and it's hard to maintain diversity. I think just having some group that's looking at the cost of that decision, that has kind of the test suite to be able to analyze so that you understand what it's worth is probably a good idea.
There's a relatively new concept called headless SaaS that's now kind of coming out in the marketplace. So ServiceNow in their Q1 earnings call mentioned that half of their net new business is coming from non-subscription based pricing. So these are usage tokens and connectors rather than the traditional SaaS seat licensing model. Are you seeing more of this? And maybe Eric, this can go to you. Is are you exploring the headless SaaS model?
Yeah, yes, we are. I think most notably, Salesforce has come out with their announcement. I don't know that they've necessarily put it in market yet, but we wrestled for months and months and months with our Salesforce teams, both business and technology, because they wanted to take advantage of Agentforce. They wanted to put all of the capabilities that those teams and those business people used inside Salesforce's AI. And my response to them was, it's just not viable to think that way relative to what Salesforce's native AI capabilities are. They're not an AI native company. They're bolting on some of these capabilities next to what they do, and they haven't yet figured out that, as an example for our transactions, somewhere between 40 and 60% of the data that every Salesforce transaction needs from a business perspective to, achieve its outcome, not AI even, just regular workflow execution, comes from outside of Salesforce, because we've got 70 or 80 different applications integrated into that ecosystem. And so now I've got all this stuff inside Salesforce going outside Salesforce to go get information, process it. Yes, there's zero trust layer and all that stuff is great, but I don't necessarily know that I want to be beholden to all of my external dependencies from Salesforce inside an AI model that Salesforce is providing. And oh, by the way, they don't have any native models. They're just using the same models that we're using. And so it was a big head scratcher for us. And then I went back to those teams and I said, I also don't understand why you guys want total control of all of the AI capabilities that are coming in Salesforce, because most of the things that people want to do are things that you have told them no for the last 10 years. You don't have time to keep up with these individual customizations that everybody wants to make their own jobs more productive. And so let them eat cake. Go give them access to some agent builders, give them an MCP into Salesforce, let them run it relatively headlessly, and then let them go be the best that they can be using Salesforce's core system of record, which is what we bought it for. And once you start to get them used to the why, and you start to realize that we will make infinite progress relative to how we go find benefits associated with use of that platform from just letting the people go do their jobs the way we've always hunted and really tarred and feathered people for this like notion of shadow IT, is now this if governed well, this distributed IT that can create great value is that our Salesforce teams are never going to be able to keep up with anyway. So I love the headless strategy. To me, it's just solidifying API and MCP based access to the platform, but it's about damn time.
And so, Mark, what if the UI stops providing the value? What happens to the seat-based licensing model for your clients? Does their whole estate, their software estate, change?
Oh man, you give me the one that gets me in trouble. I think there is certainly the potentiality that that has to happen, right? So the situation you just described, would you say that application is still providing the same amount of value as it was previously, and how do you price all of that? I think to make an affirmative or positive statement, these SaaS companies, not just Salesforce, all of them really, they have a real challenge on their hands in regards to how are they going to add value to the organization in such a way that they maintain their current pricing levels, even if it's not structure. They're publicly traded companies. Their revenue is supposed to go up. And for ones that have thoroughly penetrated the market, that there's only one way for that to happen. So, they have this challenge of how are they going to continue to add value to justify their pricing levels while also enabling these agent outcomes that everybody's asking for, because if they don't enable the agent outcomes, people will get off those platforms.
Last topic, and then we'll close out. I dying to ask this question because I think it's influential having Mark up here, having a leader of an organization up here as well. I am very curious to know what the entry-level jobs look like in this new market. How does AI, how is it already shifting your enterprise, Eric? And then for you, Mark, what does it look like to have an entry-level job at KPMG in 2028 to 2030?
I want to hear Mark's answer.
Oh, all right. You're going to make me go first? Now I wonder what Rasan's going to say to me when I come off the stage. So, consulting is an interesting field. It's always been one where apprenticeship was a big deal. How to understand what's valuable to your clients, how to understand what's a win for them, how do you manage and position as an advisor and as a company that can go in and do that for them. So, in that way, I don't see a lot of change. What we do see a lot of is they're doing more valuable work early. Like, the days of when you're 22 years old and you come out of school and you're scanning receipts or like looking at line items and things, like all that stuff is gone. And we have a lot of people who grew up doing that for the first, couple of years of their career. And they're going into value added work, but helping them learn how to identify, where the areas of jagged intelligence are in the AI and when they're getting good output and when they're not, and how to use judgment and all of those things are really apprenticeship level activities. It's changed the nature of how we engage with them, but it hasn't changed our hiring of them, and it hasn't changed our desire to get them. We are ultimately a people business at the end of the day, and we need the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, I think so. I also spent 17 years in consulting, and so I often reminisce about the days of old. And if I had what I had now back then, man, I could have been so much better, smarter, faster, everything. But I don't think now, even with hindsight, that this concept of apprenticeship is changing, because I also think that people are they're not willing to pay attention to the fact that the market dynamics within the consulting industry, as an example, is also changing, right? I think, and I'm not going to speak for KPMG, per se, but I think generally speaking, just like every other company, you want clients that are bigger and can spend more, right? And you're looking to maximize your share of wallet within those companies. And I think, at least where I was for all of those years, we tend to ignore middle market. And now middle market is exploding with opportunity relative to what AI can afford. And where do you want to go? Create your apprenticeship programs. Where do you want to go put some attention? Where do you want to grow, your business, your portfolio, et cetera? Well, it's within mid-market at a minimum. And I think that's a great place to push towards this apprenticeship nature, and getting people to pay attention to what a breeding ground for future leadership might look like. And then I would say, generally speaking, apprenticeship or not, as we're hiring new people, we haven't stopped hiring out of college. We haven't stopped hiring new people. I just think the way in which we're conducting those conversations looks a lot differently, right? So now it's like, don't really care what's on your resume, but I'd like to see your portfolio. I'd like to understand how you think about this job relative to using AI to be a 10x version of yourself walking in the door. And so, those are the types of things that we're looking at now versus what we were doing a year ago.
Yeah, hiring engineers is more like hiring designers used to be. It's like, I want to see, like, what do you have in your GitHub? Like, what are you working on? What are you playing with? But I'll totally take the free consulting, by the way. That's a good idea. Thank you.
It strikes me that, as people elevate through college and then into the workforce, they're going to have to learn how to manage agents, manage models, manage these platforms to help them in their workplace, right? So it's not good enough to just graduate with a degree in history and think that you're going to achieve great things. You really have to kind of explore these models. What are their capabilities? What are the right models for the right application or exercise, workflow, whatever? That I think is going to be the future of where business is going, especially as we get college graduates into the workforce. The apprenticeship program is going to be monumental, but then also learning how to manage those models, those agents, the workflows, and coexist with AI. And just to wrap things up here, I kind of want to give you guys all a thought experiment to walk away with, that if you picked out one agent today in your workplace, can you do these 4 things with that one agent? Can you figure out what its reach is? Can you figure out what it did last Tuesday? Can you figure out how much it's costing you to run that agent? And then can you figure out if you can shut it down in an hour or less if you needed to? So I'll leave you with that. Mark, Eric, any other last words before we wrap up?
I love those 4 questions, and I especially love the last question that you asked. I would say the predominant value that we've created and the maturity that we have implemented at Cox is really wrapped around this notion that we have productized every single use case that we have put forth. And what that means is setting expectations for what it does and what value is going to come out of it and what the impact is, and then not building things that take more than 3 months to go put in market, because you just start to lose your way. And the most important question that we ask along the way, outside of what and why, is that last one, which is, if you can't turn this thing off without impacting a whole lot of other things, we're doing this the wrong way as well.
I guess I'll just end on, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Try and have some fun. This is a really special moment in time. Enjoy.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.